Rama Rama Mansa Paribhatiga Chaga Stotara Sarashi Srimad Divine A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahansa Paribhatiga Chaga Stotara Sarashi Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Shri Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Sri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai. Shri Navali Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Dhamaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Narayanam Naraskricham Naram Chaivam Narotravam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayat Nasta Parayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloker Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. So, reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, was it 12th chapter? 19th chapter, 12th verse, I think. Subhakati Shveyata Desha Bhuyaha Krita Panamas Vachikir Sitam Yat Yapayama Shavivikta Cheta Savivikta Cheta Upashito Gre Vigritaha Panihi Sukha, happily. Upavisteshu, all sitting down. Tata, thereupon. Teshu, unto them the visitors. Bhuya, again. Krita pranahama, Krita pranamaha, having effect offered obeisances. Sva, his own. Chikir Shitam, decision of fasting. Yat, who. Vigyapayamasha, submitted. Vivikta Chetaha, one whose mind is detached from worldly affairs. Upastitaha, being present. Agre, before them. Abhigrihita, humbly with folded hands. Translation. After all the rishis and others had seated themselves comfortably, the king, humbly standing before them with folded hands, told them of his decision to fast until death. Responsibly. After all the rishis and others had seated themselves comfortably, the king, humbly standing before them with folded hands, told them of his decision to fast until death. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Although the king had already decided to fast until death on the bank of the Ganges, he humbly expressed his decision to elicit the opinions of the great authorities present there. Any decision, however important, should be confirmed by some authority. That makes the matter perfect. This means that the monarchs who ruled the earth in those days were not irresponsible dictators. They scrupulously followed the authoritative decisions of the saints and sages in terms of Vedic injunction. Maharaj Parikshit, as a perfect king, followed the principles by consulting the authorities, even up to the last days of his life. The verse again. After all the rishis and others had seated themselves comfortably, the king, humbly standing before them with folded hands, told them of his decision to fast until death. Mukam karoti pachalam pangum langayate girim yat kripatarham bonde Shri Guru dinatarane. Maharaj Parikshit is exhibiting the traits of a perfect Rajarishi or ruler. He's consulting with authorities. It's stated in the Chaitanya Chaitamrita, that one should consult with everyone, especially those who are authorities. This is in the Adi Leela. And one should consult, I think the verse states that one should consult with everyone, including a spiritual master. In other words, one cannot think that his decision, even if it's already made, is perfect. I have some experience in writing. I tend to think that whatever I've done is perfect and everyone understands it, but editors don't necessarily think that way. And they adjust things and make them better, actually. So a good writer has to be, I think, a little bit thick-skinned, knowing that things may be changed a little bit. Even Prabhupada himself consulted, even he had made decisions prior to his consultations. He consulted with his devotees to verify what he was planning to do, even though he was going to probably do it anyway. But sometimes people change. There was an incident, it's in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the first chapter, eighth chapter. It's the teachings of Queen Kunti, where Arjuna is supposed to punish Aswatthama. And he's being tested because he's getting conflicting instructions. From one side, Yudhisthira says that his life should be spared, and Draupadi says life should be spared, and at the same time he had promised Draupadi that he would stand on the head of Ashwatthama, that he would kill him for committing the abominable action of killing her own children. So there was conflicting opinions, and then Bhima wanted him to kill him immediately, and they not only were giving him conflicting instructions, but they were elevated people. They were people who had to be respected, and they gave a lot of but they knew a lot of, and I think they even gave a lot of spiritual instructions as to backing up what they were saying, that he should be killed. Some said he should be killed, some said he should not be killed. So Krishna was testing him, how he would act in the face of conflicting opinions. Sometimes we find there are conflicting opinions, even in scriptural advice. I think it's said somewhere in the Mahabharata that a symptom of a muni is that he always differs in his interpretation, his tikas, from other munis. That's necessary. So in philosophy, sometimes either Western philosophy or Eastern philosophy, we find conflicting opinions. So Arjuna had to decide what to do. He had to make a compromise. In this case, a compromise was made. Sometimes when conflicting opinions are made, compromises do have to be executed. So this wasn't exactly a compromise because it was scripturally authorized. It's said in the Bhagavad Gita that for one who is famous, infamy is worse than death. So Arjuna had to kill him and not kill him at the same time, which was not an easy thing to do, to kill someone and not kill him at the same time. But he did it because he relied on evidence from the Bhagavad Gita. For one who is famous, infamy is worse than death, and other scriptural writings. Some say that a Brahmin whose mother is still alive and whose father has died, his father is a Brahmin, should not be killed because he has to look after his mother. And others say that someone who violates the rules of the laws of Manu, who kills children, what to speak of them being without weapons, they were asleep. So he had to be killed according to the laws of Manu. But there was a conflict. So what he did was he had to use what Prabhupada describes as his sharp intelligence as to what to do. And what he did was he insulted the man. He drove them out of the camp, Aswatthama, and he took the jewel from his forehead, which is a great insult for a kshatriya, to have the jewel removed from his forehead. And according to the painting of what he did to Ashwatthama, a painting that was probably directed and approved by Srila Prabhupada, he cut his hair in patches, so that you've seen this picture, that he's it's a very strange looking haircut. Hair going out in places and bald in other places, and hair going out in other places and bald in other places. So he somehow or other he was able to make a settlement that was accepted, and it was accepted by Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures, even though there were conflicting opinions and conflicting instructions from different parts of the Vedas. In a purport in the I think it's the third canto. Yeah, Prabhupada discusses the term Svajati. I think some of you, I think Bhanu, maybe Maharaj, knows what this means. People of the same, literally of the same caste. And in that purport, he says that devotees should cement should cement relationships with like-minded people. So this phrase Svajati is somewhat compromised. It's not exactly of the same caste, but it's like-minded people. They may be or may not be of the same caste, but they're of a similar mind. And in the Upadeshamrita, it's stated that one Guyamakati Prichiti should, and it's also stated in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Prema Maitre Kripopeksha. One of the symptoms of a Uttama Adhikari is that he develops friendships between devotees. He cultivates relationships, and he works at making friendships with devotees. So these are some of the instructions that are in the Shastras that are behavioral principles that devotees have to follow. They must worship the Supreme Lord according to the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. They must preach to the innocent or try to enliven the innocent. They should avoid the envious, and they must make friendship with devotees. And it's stated in the Upadeshamrita Guhyam Akati Prichati that this is one of the secrets of devotional service. That one should cement relationships between like-minded people. And in devotional service, sometimes we find that people are not all like-minded. Sometimes they're very different, and they have very different opinions. But when there are events like a Ratha Yatra or Govardhana Puja or something like that, they set aside their differences, at least temporarily, and argumentation, and work together, shoulder to shoulder, to make the preaching event first class, to offer their service to Krishna in a united way. Prabhupada has used the word conjointly. Yeah, I think somewhere he uses the word cooperative, we have to cooperate together. And then at some point he mentions I think it's an Aesop fable it's taken from, that sticks, if they're bundled together, it's difficult to break them, but they can be broken separately. So this is an argument for solidarity and unity. In a famous letter to our Kirtananda and Rupanuga, written in 1974, Prabhupada says that we should discuss the principle of unity and diversity. That was what he phrased it as, unity and diversity. Every year in Mayapur, all the leaders of the movement should discuss it. I think this is being discussed now among the leaders of the movement. But Prabhupada wrote that this should be done a long time ago, 1974. So better late than never. Even if it's not gotten around to until the last couple of years, it's better late than never. In an offering to Prabhupada in the Vyasa Puja book, Bir Krishna Maharaj states that once upon a time, I think it was when it was for sure before 1948, when the British were ruling India. The governor of Bengal, who was a Britisher, Gary or David Anderson, came to India. He stayed in a hotel, and Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj ordered that he be served meat. And one of Prabhupada's godbrothers very criticized Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati for making this step. And Bhaktisiddhanta replied by saying, I've learned over thousands of lifetimes that you have to do anything to serve the Lord. When one of the devotees was preaching in the former Soviet Union and former Soviet countries, very atheistic, he said it was very difficult to find vegetarian food. And Prabhupada said, that's all right, then if you have to eat meat, you can eat meat, but preach like anything. So sometimes these basic rules or laws of Manu are violated. They're usually not. That's an exceptional case. but sometimes they are violated. Anyway, getting back to the idea that even though we have made decisions that we have to consult with people, we have been advised, I think it was Prabhupada who said this, that whenever someone is selling something, we should take at least another person's take on it, or get 2 or 3 estimates of the price, because we're not sure that we're being told the right thing. And very often people who are highly qualified, they have doctorate degrees in philosophy, or they have law degrees, they have they're doctors, they've studied for years and years. Sometimes they have conflicting opinions. So it's necessary to find out what we think. Sometimes we have to do what is right, or what we think is right. There's a 3-way check system that Prabhupada talked about, which was Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. But it's interesting that almost all of the Shastra is based on what was learned, what was spoken by sadhus. I think Krishnadas Kaviraj mentions this in the Madhya Lila, that everything that's in the in the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita is words that Raghunath Goswami memorized from Swarup Damodar. So they're not just the fertile brain of Krishnadas Goswami. They were spoken by learned people who were very highly realized, and that's what our postgraduate study is. Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and especially Chaitanya Charitamrita. That's the postgraduate study, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Supposedly it was read again and again. And Prabhupada has told us that he said, if I'm not mistaken, that my only complaint is that people don't read my books. So it's not a matter of, and I think Maharaj mentioned this when one of the corollary groups was professing how important the books were, that we should not only read them once, but read them over and over again. Prabhupada said this, and he said we should not only read them, we should study them. So even though we may be reading something again and again, it seems a bit repetitious, but there's new realizations in everything. There's a story of a man who was very learned, who had a very large bookshelf full of books that he'd learned from his studies. And one day, someone was walking, and he was up on the first or second floor of a building, was walking by his house and saw a big pile of books on the sidewalk, on the street. And he was very curious. And then he knew that these books, he looked at some of them, that they belonged to this man. And he became very curious, and he asked the man, what's going on? And he said, well, I've thrown all my books out. And he had one book in his bookshelf, and that was the Bhagavad Gita. He decided there was only one book worth reading again and again, and one book worth studying, and one book worth keeping, and that was the Bhagavad Gita. And all the other books were cast away, were just treated as garbage, were thrown out on the street. Even though Prabhupada set our society up so that the temple presidents were the leaders, he asked them to consult with others on occasion, and I think this 3-way system is also followed in the United States Supreme Court. Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu, they call it legislative, judicial, and executive. But there's the courts, there's the president, and then there's the Senate and the Congress who make laws. So they're meant to check each other. They're meant to consult before they're finalized. It's also said in the Mahabharata that there are Mahajans, and we have to follow. The secret to knowledge is following what they say. Maharaj Janaka, Maharaj Shiva Maharaj, Lord Brahma, Vyasadeva, and others, and Yamaraj. They're the real leaders. And all of these scriptures, even though they're written in written form, they're spoken. And originally, of course, most of them, all of them, I think, were spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they were passed on. And I think this is one of the things that Krishnadas Kaviraj mentions, that he's following the law of disciplic succession in repeating what he learned from Raghunath Goswami, and what Raghunath learned from Swarup Damodar Goswami, who was Lord Chaitanya's personal secretary. This is the way that knowledge is passed along. It's not just coming out of our fertile brains, it's also coming from written scriptures. Before I was a devotee, I saw a film in which one of the actors, who was, I think he was the Archbishop or something like that of England, and this is going back, supposed to have been placed about 500 years ago, and he had these realizations that he was just praying to God, just making things up. Sort of not, and I thought, that's strange. Why isn't he saying what the Bible says or whatever his scriptures say? So it's actually quite necessary to. And Prabhupada is very meticulous in quoting scripture. He in almost everything he wrote, he gave the verse number, the text number, the chapter number, or the page number or something like that, because he knew that especially people who read very scrutinizingly want to know where this is written. Is it written? And if it is written, where is it written? And what is the evidence? So he used the sayings in many books as what he called evidence. Nowadays, evidence is supposedly coming from people's observation, like science. And it's interesting that the word science comes from a Greek or Latin root that usually, S-C-I-R-E, I think it is, and it usually meant just knowledge. It wasn't just observation and experiments, it was knowledge. Prabhupada was a little dismissive of people from some parts of the world coming to America and not getting good jobs, supposedly like lawyers and doctors and philosophers and professors, that they were supposedly just working in technological fields. One time when I was with Srila Prabhupada, there was a big meeting at Berkeley, in the University of California at Berkeley. At that time, there was about 30 or 40,000 students. That was considered a very large student body at that time. And it was in a very large hall, and we were sitting on a stage with Prabhupada, and one of the students said that, well, I'm here because, and this was someone who was from India, you could tell by the accent, but was speaking in English, that I'm going to go back to my country, and with all the technology that I'm learning, I'm going to make things better in my country. And Prabhupada lashed out at this student. He said, you are a beggar. You've come to this country to take advantage of all of its facilities, it's all of its technology, and you're studying technology in this university. I am a giver. You're a beggar, I am a giver. I've come to this country to give people the wealth of knowledge that comes from our country. He knew that this person was Indian. And so he really, it was one of the first times I ever saw Prabhupada so angry. And it was a very large hall full of people. And after he spoke, silence rang out. I mean, it was a really, really heavy thing to say to someone who was asking an apparently innocent question, that I'm going to take this technology back and make things better in my country. But Prabhupada said, I'm not going to take things back. I've come here to give things from our country, the wealth of knowledge that is within India. When the temple opened in Juhu, in I think it was December of 1977, or 1967 was, I think, the year. What was it, the year that the temple opened in movement? 78. Yeah. It was a very, very, very memorable occasion, and that we had even invited the I think it was Morarji Desai was the Prime Minister then of India, and he didn't come, but he was invited. Anyway, it was a very grand event, and Prabhupada is very pleased to see that the deities he established there weren't going to move, they were going to stay there, and the people that opposed it had met with all sorts of violent opposition, including death. There was a conflict with someone named Nair who sold the property to others and kept the money, and he was a bit of a white-collar criminal, we might call him. Anyway, what was I getting at? Prabhupada had a big fight with locals. I mean, it wasn't with just this man who sold the property to others before, but with a lot of people and local people who thought that Hare Krishna was just weird and shouldn't be done. But it was a very great victory when it finally opened. And Prabhupada had to fight every inch of the way. I mean, he was a fighter. I heard from reliable sources that when the temple was about to open in Vrindavan, there was a lot of opposition because Westerners were going on the altar. Not only men, but women. And all this was thought to be very highly inappropriate or irregular. And Prabhupada nevertheless pursued. And he still let those people become pujaris and worship. Most of his followers were Westerners. There was a book called Mother India, and it was written by the British. Or they contracted an American novelist to write a book called Mother India. And Prabhupada said that it read like, that was quoting Gandhi, saying it read like a drain inspector's report. I didn't read the book. I saw the first few pages, and she was, this novelist was talking about people who worshipped Kali, the goddess Kali, and how they were licking up the blood of goats that had died and been sacrificed, and it was just brutal. But this book was countered by a Punjabi who wrote a book, and he called it Uncle Sham, S-H-A-M, like hypocrisy. And it had pictures of women in bathing suits and all the things that are looked down upon in India. So it was kind of a rejoinder or a rebuttal to that book, Mother India, Uncle Sham. And anyway, it's just how it just goes to show how conflicting opinions are always there. There's some people that thought that everything England did was wonderful and great and improving and clean. And there was other people that thought that they were the tyrants, and they did some horrible, atrocious things like cutting off or smashing the thumbs of weavers that were making their own cotton instead of buying it from Manchester. So they did a lot of things, but there were a lot of good things too that came, like, of course I'm a little prejudiced, like the English language. They gave that to India, and they supposedly have the railways, the largest railway system in the world still, that moves more people than any other system. So they did some good, but on the whole, and Prabhupada himself was a follower of Mohandas Gandhi. He wanted independence for his countrymen, and they finally obtained it. Of course, they didn't necessarily improve, but they got their independence. So I'll stop there and see if there's any comments or questions on anything that this verse addresses, or anything I've talked about, or anything else, or anything at all. Please speak up, or take a few minutes to think and then speak up, or whatever. But I'll say give everyone a couple of minutes. And if you're not in this room and you're listening on I think there's a way that you can ask questions.
Text.
Pardon?
You can text.
Oh, you can text it. Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
With all this opinion that you explained, is it sometimes not leading us to feel like very uncertain after all? Feeling like there's no use of taking any decisions at the end, it's just...
Well, there is danger, I suppose. There's a risk in everything we do. And sometimes we'll consult someone who has an opposite opinion. But in this case, where Maharishi Pariksit was consulting a number of very highly learned people, he felt that they would give some valuable input. And even now, as from what I know, people are removing some of the statements that some of their gurus have said because they think that they're going to get into the hands of enemies and they're going to be used against us. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but I've heard that people are removing some of the statements that are available or accessible because of that. I mean, maybe that's true, I don't know. I've just heard that. But anyway, if one consults with people who are supposedly more advanced spiritually than we are on spiritual decisions, their input can be very valuable, even though they may be violently opposed and different to what we say. Sometimes people reject or change their opinions completely based on what they hear from others who they consider are more advanced than they are. It does happen. I mean, I've heard lots of things that the current president of the United States is going to appoint a new Supreme Court justice, and that this justice is going to overturn the abortion law. I don't know if that's just hearsay, but and that's something that's in the ether. Maybe kind of floating indefinitely. Maybe not true. Anything else? Yes?
Thank you for the class movement. So you were saying that sometimes when we ask for spiritual assistance, for advice from authorities, and we get different, sometimes even advisors of authorities, they contradict each other. And then you said that we have to use our sharp intelligence to make a decision at the end, or to find how both those seemingly contradictory advices, how they actually not contradict each other, how to find the balance. And so my question is, how to acquire that sharp intelligence?
Well, as I was saying, the Prabhupada's main complaint, I don't know if it was his main complaint, but he said his only complaint was that people don't read my books. So if we study the books that Prabhupada wrote, and he refers to many untranslated and unwritten shastras, like Puranas and Itihasas and other things. He said everything we need to know is in those books. So I've always thought that taking things from, especially from conversations and letters, is not necessarily always true in all cases, because letters are written to specific people, and conversations and walks are usually directed towards the people in those rooms and on those walks, not necessarily to people in general, whereas public lectures and books are for anybody, really. Anyone can access them. And there's a move, I don't know if it's going to be possible, but I think the letters, there's many books of conversations of Prabhupada, and I think that either they're not going to be published any further, or they're already out of print, I don't know, but they're conversations rather than books. And someone has told me that Prabhupada very carefully chose his phrases and words, sometimes that he would pore over a thing for hours before he would put it in writing. So these words were chosen very carefully. And it, it was not an ordinary thing. So if the more we read, the more we're able to scripturally support what we say, even though we might meet with conflicting advice or find conflicting instructions in different shastras. If we read carefully and study, we can find scriptural advice that supports what we say, even though it appears to be our own compromised or individual opinion. Just like for one who is famous, infamy is worse than death. Krishna found that, or Arjuna found that, and he found that in other shastras there are ways to kill and not kill someone. And, I mean, so the more we read, the better. Yes. Read and study. I think it's very critical. Someone else had a comment or question? I thought I saw a hand. No. Okay. Thank you. Oh, there's one.
I was wondering if you could explain, because it was advised that the Uttama Adhikari should make friendship, and if Uttama Adhikari means you see everyone as a jiva, and one might say that the friendship is based on the body concept of life. If you can explain why Uttama Adhikari has the desire to make friendship.
Well, as far as I know, making friendship with devotees or with people of svajati, of the same caste, or cementing relationships with like-minded people means that we can't be intimate with everybody. I think the stricture is that we should love everybody because everyone is a spirit soul, but we don't have necessarily intimate dealings with everybody. There are differences in age and differences in many things are different between people. Their mentalities, their backgrounds, their countries, their whatever. But like I said, one has to befriend devotees and work at developing relationships with like-minded people, with the people that we have very intimate relationships. It has to be worked at. It's not that it automatically is there. So dadati pratiganati, we can give gifts, we can give prasadam. There are different ways of cultivating a relationship, but it's not meant that we can do that for everyone. I mean, there's billions of people, literally billions of people in the world, and it's not possible to maintain that intimacy. Does that help? With all the people. I think Krishnadas wrote somewhere that in that Imajalila, it's starting in the 84th verse of the first chapter, that you can't please everybody. He didn't say that you can please all the people some of the time and some of the people all the time, but not all the people all of the time. He just said you can't please everybody. So there are always going to be inimical people that don't necessarily agree with you and think that you're wrong. And I mean, I'm talking about people in non-devotional circles. But even in devotional circles, there's people that will think you're wrong and they'll just keep their distance. And sometimes we have to just keep our distance. We can maintain a friendly relationship, but we keep a somewhat distant relationship with people that we don't have intimate dealings with. Anything else? Okay, I think that's a good place to end. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam, all glories to